We're going to be talking about a couple subjects. So I think the first piece is a presentation on our water demand model. I don't know who is up first. Larry? Yes. Okay, so is Arizona Water, Reluca, you're going to
I'll introduce Reluca here in
Okay,
just
I'm
1
sorry.
minute.
Go ahead, Steve.
Oh, no problem.
You
No
have to put my
problem.
glasses on so I can see over there.
Yes. Tonight's first subject is water and water conservation and what we are doing in our partnership with Arizona Water. And just to remind you, there's a website on the Chamber's webpage that talks about the Save It campaign. And I'll just read a couple of sentences on that and then introduce Reluca. Our community is the first in the state to have a city government and a private utility company working on a comprehensive demand management program. To meet all conservation requirements, the city and Arizona Water Company entered into a public-private partnership to leverage the strengths of both organizations. This started in April of 2021, and they've launched the Save It campaign, and Reluca can explain it much better than I can, so we have enjoyed our partnership so far, and at this time I'd like to introduce Reluca from Arizona Water Company.
Hello, my name is Reluca Milchescu. Thank you so much, Steve, for that introduction. So I am the first, emphasis on first, water conservation specialist that Arizona Water Company has. And I'm going to be giving a presentation on, the demand management program and what we've done up to date. I'm going to be focusing specifically on one element that we've developed and worked very closely with the city on. And then we'll transition it over to Greg at some point. But thank you for having us today. I'm really excited to give this presentation and get you guys more in the loop on what's going on. So just a really quick agenda of what I'll be going over specifically. So we had our lovely introduction. Thank you, Steve. I'll be going over a really quick overview of the demand management program and just a terminology point. I use the phrase demand management program and water conservation program interchangeably. So please don't get confused. And then I'll be going over past turf conversion projects that the city has done. And then we'll transition into City Hall and what the opportunities are for City Hall. Okay, so I wanted to start by saying that the entire demand management program all started on a foundation of this 15% general land use plan goal of reducing our water use by 15% by the year 2050. So that was the impetus or the foundation for getting this program started and starting this partnership with the city. So in order to meet that goal, that 15% reduction goal, the city has already done their own efforts for conservation. Arizona Water Company also has their own efforts for conservation, but this program was to determine what more can be done. Where are more opportunities? How can we effectively reach that 15% goal? And in order to assess that properly, we conducted a comprehensive water use assessment. And again, I'm more than happy to give another presentation at another time to kind of dive into all the different elements. I'll be speaking about one thing specifically. And out of the comprehensive water use assessment, we determined that it would be appropriate to create a targeted measure called WaterWise Outside, and I'll dive into that a little bit later. But we launched our program April 1st, 2021. It was very, very exciting. Along that came the social media campaign, the Save It campaign, and Save It is directly in line with the Chamber of Commerce's Love It campaign that was going on, so that fit in really, really perfectly. And Arizona Water Company does have monthly meetings with the mayor and City of Casa Grande members in order to give updates on how things are going. And I will say, you will notice slight changes in the presentation that I'm giving today and the slides that you've received. I'm happy to speak to that a little bit later, but just be aware that there are some changes. So I mentioned there are a bunch of different elements within the comprehensive demand management program, but I'm going to be dialing into specifically the WaterWise Outside program. The reason why we developed that, the main reason is we wanted to make sure that we had a holistic conservation program. We realized that with launching the Save It campaign on social media, a lot of the focus was for residents and businesses on how they can adopt practices for water conservation, but we wanted to make sure it was holistic and that the message was that everyone is doing their part. And a big part of that is large-scale outdoor commercial water users. So that's what this program focuses on, how we can take advantage of opportunities for conservation outdoors for large-scale properties. Our plan was to start with city properties because we already have such an amazing relationship with the city. We're going to move on to HOAs and schools, just again to make sure that we're holistic and equitable. And one of the focus in the first few meetings what I had with Steve and Mike Edwards was making sure that we're looking through a lens of where is functional turf, how can we utilize that and make sure that we keep functional turf, and where are there opportunities for maybe reducing non-functional turf. And when I say functional turf, I mean turf that is utilized by the community, that is a resource. People play on it, people sit on it, people recreate and enjoy it. There are parts around the city where there absolutely is functional turf, and we want to keep that, and other areas where people don't utilize the grass as much, so maybe there's a potential to reduce and utilize that water somewhere else. Before I move on, I want to make sure that you guys know when I think water conservation as a conservation specialist, I have mainly two goals or objectives. The first one is to reduce water waste. By that I mean make sure that if there are leaks that we stop it, that water isn't used without a purpose. So that's the first goal. And then the second goal is the water that we are using, make sure that we're using it as efficiently as possible. Spread that drop as far out as we can. So that's kind of my ethic behind water conservation and my personal internal goals. So with the social media campaign, we wanted to make sure, again, that we were being holistic, and so we decided to create a Casa Grande Saves It mini-series, where through social media, we emphasize what the city has already done for water conservation and use it as a platform to highlight what we're going to be doing in the future and are currently doing. This did not originally come out as an idea in the first WaterWise Outside meeting. This kind of came out of having conversations with Steve and learning about what the city has already done and thinking, wow, that's such a great story. We want to make sure that the public is aware of it. And also trying to stay ahead of the curve and ahead of any negative comments that come up out of, what is the city doing? So this mini-series highlights past conservation programs. These are examples of 3 posts that we've made. These are 3 turf conversion projects that have already been executed that I'll talk about a little bit later, but I just wanted to kind of show you what those posts looked like. If you haven't followed the Facebook page, I highly encourage it. We're on Instagram too. Just a no shame plug there. And what was interesting is every single time we posted about what the city has already done, the topic of City Hall came up naturally. So residents were posting, what about City Hall? These are 2 examples of comments where people were like, what about City Hall? The sprinklers and the grass. And so that was already kind of being brought to the surface. So although Steve and I already had conversations in our first few meetings about looking at City Hall, it was interesting that the public was also showing interest in that, which is why we dialed in a little bit more to City Hall. And before I move on, I wanted to mention that we have an opportunity. So with our social media pages, we have this amazing team called Blossom Digital Marketing. They help us do all of this. And we have an opportunity to do something called a social listening tool, which essentially lets us gather data on what the overall tone or perspective by the community is on a specific topic. So currently, we're using the social listening tool to determine how people feel about Arizona Water Company and help us find those comments and posts, but we can utilize the social listening too for City Hall as well, if and when we decide to continue posting about it. So I wanted to highlight quickly those 3 projects that I already mentioned, the first one being the Dorothy Powell Senior Center. So over 10,000 square feet of turf was removed at Dorothy Powell. It started around August 2019, ended November 2019, and where the yellow is, I've highlighted where that turf was removed. And I'll speak to the water savings that came out of that project in a little bit. And then there was Fire Station 501, a little over 3,000 square feet was removed there. That was also in early 2019. There's a really interesting story about how we incorporated plants at Fire Station 501 that we can talk to if we have time, but for now I'll skip over it. And then the Casa Grande Municipal Courthouse, turf was also removed there, a little under 6,000 square feet. So I wanted to include a graph to kind of highlight how those turf conversion projects translated to water savings. So I have the 2018 water use data, so that was before any turf was removed. 2019, that was in the middle of these projects, or right around when these projects, the end of 2019 was when some of them wrapped up. And then 2020, just to kind of highlight, for example, Dorothy Powell Center, where 10,000 square feet was removed, we reduced water use by 42% from 2018 to 2019, and then by 53% from 2019 to 2020 when that project was officially completed for over a year. Just to kind of speak to the positives of doing turf conversion where there's non-functional turf. And so now I'll go into City Hall. So the methodology that I use when I assess a property and we kind of talk about functional turf is we try to understand the current lay of the land. So using a fabulous GIS analyst that Arizona Water Company has in-house, we were able to map out where the turf is, where the desert landscaping is, where there's more high water use plants like annuals or roses or anything like that. And we came up with these numbers. So we have existing turf area over 47,000 square feet, desert landscaping or low water use landscaped area over 32,000 square feet, for a total landscapable area of about 80,000. So just to kind of give you some parameters of what the situation currently is and where those areas are. And before I jump into the model that we utilized to determine what some estimated water savings would be, I wanted to let you all know that it is really difficult to quantify true savings monetarily for some of these projects, just because there's a lot that goes into utility bills and rates and all of that. And so I'm going to mainly try and focus on water savings. But I developed within the first few months of my position, so I've been with Arizona Water Company for about a year, I developed an estimated water budgeting tool to help me model how much water would be saved if things were changed, if turf was reduced and desert landscaping was increased. These are some assumptions that come with that model, just to highlight that it is a model. It is not perfect. There's gray area. One of the things is that it assumes that water rainfall historically is consistent, which we all know is not true. Hardly had any rain in 2020, and then we had interesting patterns in the last year. So the information about the model, take with a grain of salt. It is meant to be a baseline and to give us something to work off of when we're thinking about doing turf conversion projects or removal projects. So when I put in that square footage that I showed you, for City Hall, this is what the estimated or calculated demand would be. So there's an estimated demand of about 2 million gallons per year for the current turf and landscape as it currently is. And that bar graph comes from the modeling tool to kind of highlight where that water is going and when it should be applied and all of that seasonally. I did not want to go into hypothetical cost savings, so I put in the true cost for what I estimate was used for irrigation at City Hall in the past 12 months, and that comes around to about $29,000, just to give you guys some metrics to go off of. So our current turf area is about 47,000. The proposal that we are bringing forward today would be proposing that we remove about 24,000 square feet to keep a remaining functional turf of about 23,000, so that's a 51% decrease in turf. And low water use landscapable area or desert landscaping, it's currently at 32. We would want to increase it by 25,000 to get us to about 57,000 square feet of desert landscaping. And I'll let Greg talk a little bit more about what that's going to look like and what are some amazing positives of having specific types of desert landscaping. But those are the two metrics that we're going to kind of look at: 51% decrease in turf, 78% increase of desert landscaping. So before I show you what the projections of how much water could be reduced, I want to elaborate a little bit more on assumptions. So using this tool, I'm going to assume that all the plants that get added in are desert plants and they've already been established. They're over 3 years old. Those are I just need to make sure I cross my T's and dot my I's when I work with this tool. So that is an assumption moving forward, but essentially, if we were to do that 51% decrease, 78% increase, it would overall lead to a 31% decrease of water usage for the landscape. So the purple bars are where we're currently at. The red bars is where we could be at if we applied those metrics to the current landscape at City Hall. And then the water would be reduced to 1.4 million gallons of demand. So what does that mean? So those numbers that I gave you were models. I wanted to apply the overall potential reduction is 635,000 gallons of water. To kind of put that in perspective, that amount of water is enough to supply about 5 to 8 homes in Casa Grande with water. Because I know otherwise 635,000 gallons is an arbitrary number. So when I take that reduction, that 635 gallons, and apply it to what was actually spent with water and for cost at City Hall last year, we see about a 13% reduction in water use and an 8% reduction on the water bill. And that is, again, taking this modeling estimate and applying it to true numbers from the past 12 months. In the next slide, I will pass this over to Greg, and he'll be able to dive into a little bit about what this conversion would look like. But I wanted to, before I hand it over, make sure that you all are aware that sometimes when we think about water conservation and specifically doing a turf conversion at a City Hall property, I would say that the metric for success should not necessarily be money saved on the utility bills, because we have an amazing opportunity, because there's already a public attention on City Hall and what we're doing with City Hall, to use changes at City Hall to build relationships with the community and really make sure that they understand that we're not just putting all the focus on them to reach this goal, that we're really all in this together, and we're going to get to that 15% goal together. So that is.
Luca, before you leave this screen,
yes.
I know that you guys have calculated the dollar savings out if we maintain that, or we get to that 15% reduction in water use. What was the number is over 50-year lifespan that we were looking at? Do you remember, Terry Sue? Was it $460 million or something like that?
So
in today's water value?
Yes, so the projected savings, assuming a 15% reduction in per capita demand, was about 5,600 acre feet, as I recall, and in today's dollars, if we had to replace that supply, would be about $47 million.
47 million. I had added a zero, sorry. Okay, still a lot of money. So that's the point. A little bit over a long period of time makes a big difference. So
Yes.
thank you.
And
Awesome.
Mr. Mayor, perhaps before Luca sits down, we're going to have plenty of time. So do you want to
yeah.
go back and cover the other three projects or entertain questions before we hand it off to Greg, or do you want to save those for the end?
We can say
I can, yeah, we
Okay,
can
all right.
save some for the end.
Okay.
So. Greg? Yes.
Yep, come on up.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Hi, my name's Greg Swick. I'm a landscape architect. I've got a firm, the Morris Swick Partnership. We've worked with the town before here. This is my 32nd year in business. The last project I think we completed with Casa Grande was the rec center. We're on their on-call list, and that's when Steve had given me a call to come and take a look at this project. I think it's a great project that you're doing, trying to save water. I've been reading a lot about how Casa Grande is going to start growing. This whole area is going to start growing. So it's definitely something that we definitely need to pay attention to. I got two boards up here. One is the existing conditions, and one of them, if I can do this right, nope. And one of them is proposed. And the reason why I brought the existing ones out, just so that you can visually just see the difference. Basically what we talked about, I use the term programmable lawn area instead of functional, and it's basically the same thing. Lawn area that people can use, and then get rid of the lawn that's not usable. We talked about this building, this architecture here, and it's got this great walkway coming up to it, and we thought that the lawn on either side of that was functional. It not only is it aesthetic and forms a setting for the building, but it also can be used for setting up displays and things like that. The public can use that. We also talked about the parades that come down Florence Boulevard, and we don't want the people sitting and the kids sitting on gravel. So we kept the lawn running down Florence Boulevard, and then I always come from the freeway. And I always like when you come past there and you get the shot of City Hall, that there is some grass coming through there. So that's what we did with the grass in that area. And we got rid of the rest of the grass. We got rid of the grass that's up on the median island as you come in on 8th Street. We were getting rid of the small fountain that's on the north side and putting a specimen tree in there to help kind of soften a lot of that asphalt that's out there. And then there's a small little portion of your property that's on the northwest corner. And we took that grass out over there, and that could be an area where we've got a bosque of trees, maybe stabilized granite, and then put some chairs and tables over there for people to go out and sit. One of the things that we need to do when you're asking people to get rid of their lush lawns and go with xeriscape, and a lot of people consider that desert, and then in their mind they think, oh, there's going to be this thirsty landscape that's out there. Being low water use in xeriscape landscaping, it doesn't need to look thirsty. It doesn't need to look barren. It can still be very interesting, great textural plants that have smells and things like that. So it's not meant to say we're going to tear the lawn out and then we're going to have this thirsty landscaping out there. One of the things you can see on the graphic that I've got up here is we're really going to buffer that parking lot from the street. So as you come in and you look at it, we're softening that parking lot a lot up there. One of the things I really always liked when I came to City Hall here is the memorial that you have for the kids out there. I always thought that was a really touching piece out there. There's a clock out there, and I'm not sure the history of that clock, but one of the things that I was proposing on this is if you have a parade and the kids are out there, what can the kids do? I don't want to put a playground out in City Hall, but we were maybe doing a labyrinth or something like that out there. So it's more of a passive plaything for the kids to play, and that way you got kids playing in an environment where, or in an area where you're trying to be respectful of kids that didn't have a good childhood. In those areas too, we would do more of a xeriscape demonstration garden. The rest of it, we're talking about xeriscape landscaping, but this would be more of a demonstration. We would have a lot more different plants in those areas. Same thing over on the west side where the fallen city workers are. I'd like to create that being more of a demonstration garden in there, as a xeriscape demonstration garden. Then on the north side in the courtyard, on either side of those could also be areas that could be for demonstration gardens. But like I said, the rest of the xeriscape landscaping would not be, like I said, it'd be low water, but it would also be a lush landscape. So not only are we trying to save water with reducing the lawn areas, but also with the irrigation. There's controllers out there now that are very smart controllers. They tap into weather stations, so they can actually control. They can shut off if it's windy out, so that you're not spraying lawn when it's windy out, and it'll readjust and do that at a different time. We'll have a master valve and a flow sensor on there, so if there's any breakage in the system, it'll automatically shut down, so we're not watering if there's a problem out there. The piping, it'll be a hard pipe drip irrigation system, not the poly tubing, so it'll be a substantial irrigation system for less leaks. Obviously, we'll use emitters to water to irrigate the plant material, the most efficient way to do that. And again, the sprinkler heads, we'll be using low angle sprinkler heads to help with wind throw. Also, we'll be irrigating, we'll schedule to irrigate at night so that we'll have less evaporation. Yes?
Any reclaimed water that you use for watering the plants in the park and those type of things?
I don't know if there is any reclaimed water out here. We normally will do that if there's a pipe nearby. But that's the only time I've ever used it. It would be great to use it if we've got it available.
Yeah, it'd be a good use. I know in Phoenix, they have planted trees with canopies, and it drops their temperatures down. And the park right here is known all over the state for people to drive in and see all those big trees and say, boy, that's a pretty place, and let's stop and take a look or whatever. But as I say, it's a catch-22 when you come to, you need water for trees and certain plants, and the certain plants need to pay back if they are canopied or whatever. But and I didn't know if there was any way to, I don't know, does Maricopa scatter their water through the different areas?
They do, but Maricopa was set up that way. They have purple pipe all over the city.
Yeah.
We don't have purple pipe, though, unfortunately.
Let's get a
We'll
can or two of.
We'll just bring out a truck.
Mr. Powell, if I can interrupt for a moment, we do use affluent water at the golf course, at Dave White Golf Course.
Yes, I did know that, and I
Yes.
think that is really a good idea. I think anything you can do on conservation is good, but you want to make sure you're not destroying some of your assets in trying to to accomplish this. I think, you know, anytime you can save water, conserve water, and you're not affecting something else in a negative manner, it's a pretty good deal.
One of the things I forgot to mention is as you come up to the entry of City Hall, we've got those two landscape areas that are kind of basins where they flow down. Those are really hard to keep water on and water the plant materials, so you're just basically wasting water. It's just flowing out. This plan proposes to have some retaining walls so that they would be terraced, so that you've got, it would be more for water harvesting. Plus you've got windows that are covered up down there. Yep. And we'd be putting the plants in between them, but then there's also really nice plants that'll cascade over those walls. So we'll be able to landscape those areas
Like right here.
and give a nicer look to the offices.
The water pipes actually came right by Peart Park and right up by the city all the way out in times past. And I don't know if we're harvesting any water that way. I don't think we are we, Larry?
Any other questions? Greg, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Steve, anything else? Or?
I do not. Did you have any questions for Reluca on her presentation?
I asked my question.
Yeah, and Larry suggested that I also bring up the other properties that we're focusing on for waterwise outside. So if we don't have any questions on that, I can also speak to those
That's a good idea.
as well. So the really fun thing about the Waterwise Outside program is that we looked at all of the properties the city maintain, but there are a lot. I think there were like 18 or 17, which is a pretty big undertaking. So in meetings with Steve and Mike Edwards, we tried to dial in onto maybe the top 3 and have like a phase out program. So we started looking at City Hall, and the other 2 properties we wanted to look at were Carmick Nat, which already some amazing conservation efforts have been adopted there. The things that Greg was talking about with the smart controller and the flow sensor, those are all things that have been executed at Carmick Nat and been doing really, really well in order to conserve water at those fields. So looking at that area, and then looking at Ivy Park, which is a retention area that has a lot of turf, but other than what we can assume isn't utilized too much, or there's some opportunities to save water there because it is a retention area. So those are the other 2 projects that we've been kind of looking at, just to make sure that we're being, you know, we're not just pigeonholing ourselves with one project or 2, but looking at different opportunities and kind of weighing the benefits.
And maybe you can explain to City Council too, I don't know if they were copied on that communication or not, but the offer to our HOAs to do the water
Yes.
evaluations
Yes.
for
So,
free?
yeah, Arizona Water Company, we paid into a contract with a gentleman named Gary Woodard. He got a grant from the Department of Water Resources to do irrigation audits, more of a sense of looking at existing irrigation infrastructure and seeing where there are leaks, with a specific emphasis on HOA common areas. And so because Arizona Water Company hopped on board with that, we provided extra funding. We're allowed a certain number of audits by Gary, and so we're looking at HOAs in Casa Grande, looking at their water usage, taking a really analytical perspective and approach to determining, you know, where are HOAs with common areas that maybe have leaks or that are trending upwards with their water usage. We've already executed an audit at Ironwood Village, and that went super, super well. I hope no one lives there, but there were a lot of water leaks in the common areas, so a huge potential for savings, which is a good thing. That's exactly the type of assessment that Gary is intended to be doing for those HOAs. So that's something that is
Just
on
the
our
Coolidge
agenda.
guy lives there. Miller.
Yes.
Question. So I like it. I see your website, our website, Facebook page,
Yes.
and it attached to the chamber website. And I saw the suggestions like the voting, and I saw when it was on Instagram and stuff, voting for the types of plants. So could homeowners go on there? Is there suggestions for here's what plants you could plant? You know, if they're looking to do something, and how much water they take to help a homeowner plan to. I mean, I know the HOA, and that's great, and I don't think there's enough money right now to design every homeowner's yard, but maybe we could give like some suggestions and stuff. Is that part of the program?
Yeah, absolutely. We have some amazing online free resources that talk specifically about that. So the Arizona Municipal Water Users Association, which is more of like a central Arizona group, they published a guide that is exactly that, what plants are native to the area, how much water they need, and we've posted that online. We also attend a lot of outreach events where we're pushing people towards that website and making sure that people have the resources available to put together an amazing landscape.
Look, you had an earlier slide that showed some of the stuff that we've been posting online.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like a how-to kind of programs. So there's different programs that they've had out there
Yeah,
I was kind of giving her softball.
under the CG.
Oh, and I am open to recommendations if you're like, hey, I think the public would absolutely love to learn about this. I'm all ears, because right now it's just me coming up with the content, what I think would be effective, engaging with the community and doing surveys and trying to figure out what they want. So
Have you thought about working with the county extension office too, with their gardening department possibly?
the Master Gardeners?
Yeah.
Yeah, a few different times. We, I forget what they're called. There's a community garden somewhere in Casa Grande. I don't remember the name of it, but they just put together a workshop working with master gardeners. And yeah, we were involved a little bit with that and making sure the public, that was a really amazing education opportunity where people can go and learn about rainwater harvesting and actually put plants in the ground.
All right.
And so, yeah, looking at things like that, the master gardeners are an amazing resource.
You know, and I just want to add on because, and I don't live in Ironwood Village, but in Ironwood Commons, but I know that with HOAs, they have specific that we must have X amount of trees, X amount of bushes. And I think that that's the place that we need to start doing some education because some of those things are just not viable,
Yeah.
you know, where we live. And so I think to educate them because we're basically out of compliance, you know, and so I think the education part for the HOAs is going to be really important, starting with those boards.
Type of plants to put in.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, but I'm saying if they, you know, if we want to tell them which kind is best, they may have to go back and look at, you know, their own language.
Especially with all these new developments.
Oh, absolutely. If you guys have HOA board meetings that you would love me to be at, I would love to be there.
I need your
So,
card.
yes.
I think you're the only person that loves to be at HOA board meetings.
Yeah, I see a need and I try to fill a need.
You have a very good personality, by the way.
Oh, well, thank you.
Two things I'm wondering about. When it rains, we get a lot of water that goes down. A lot of the streets have been burned so that it'll go down the center, get in the ditches here. Do we claim any of that, Larry, or does it just go wherever it goes?
Mr. Powell, it essentially goes wherever it goes. There's not really an opportunity for us to claim it or harvest it. There's not any type of credit that we can obtain by the runoff. But I suspect that as new innovations and the like are developed, that there will be many of our development communities that will begin to attempt to utilize other types of water besides domestic water for these types of purposes.
I know a lot of people, not a lot, but quite a few have large containers to catch rainwater on their own property so they can use it.
Yeah,
How
well,
about,
the new project that they're building across from Safeway, that's all underground water storage,
Wow. That's really cool.
all of it,
From where?
from stormwater. So they don't have retention
Okay,
areas, so they
that's
put,
the
they put
stormwater.
underground storage containers in the ground. That new project across from Safeway is all underground storage.
Big things.
And I'm trying to figure out a legislative way to get us credit for that water when they stick it back in the aquifer.
She has a good personality. You can work with her.
I have.
What are we doing about artificial turf? Is there places where it needs to look really sharp like grass, but you go into artificial turf? I know it needs to be washed off occasionally. It's not water-free, but it's certainly
Very hot.
cheaper. And I just was wondering, like in front of the city hall or different places you like to really create an image of. Have we considered that at all? I don't know.
Sure, Mr. Powell, I think I can help answer that question. In what we presented tonight, we did not present artificial turf in front of City Hall.
Okay.
Obviously, we can look at artificial turf with any project that we have, but we would like to get your feel for if City Hall had 50% less or whatever the number is, turf, I would like to get some feedback to see if we want to continue with that project, because removing turf doesn't happen just overnight. The projects that we did internally, we did it through a series of spraying Roundup or some sort of chemical, stop watering. It looks brown for quite a while. Then some physical labor of removing the dead turf. City Hall, we probably would propose a different approach, because it might look really bad for about a year. If you go by the library right now, we're in the midst of doing one in-house, and the library turf has looked poor for a little while as we're doing this process that we do internally. And our guys change the irrigation, and they adjust the sprinklers and adjust the drip and everything so that we do have some landscape, but then we replace a lot of it with gravel. So the City Hall project would be a very big one, and would people would notice for sure.
I have a guy that I know of that when it rained and that water runs down Second Street, he was at the Wonder Bar, and he went down to the grocery store and he bought 2 fish. He came back and he tied on to them, and the water was probably about this deep, and he was showing people he was pulling fish out of there. And
Sure.
they were about to have some wrecks.
I think that when we're talking about, what looks bad for a while while we're fixing it, that is an opportunity for us to educate
Absolutely.
the community,
Yes.
and even perhaps in those areas
Do
to
you
be
have
able
signs?
to put up signs and stuff that
Sure.
say,
Yeah,
in progress, and
conservation
explain
in
that,
progress.
because I think that's a really good opportunity for education.
And I'm not proposing that we kill the turf here. What we would probably do is a more comprehensive project where we're actually removing it physically, changing the irrigation. It would be a big project. It wouldn't be just something that you just turn off the water and let it die.
Right,
So
to redesign.
we probably need to talk about that further, budgeting and getting a project cost, but
Go ahead, Matt.
there's a lot of, there would be a lot in this particular project that will go into it, rather than just letting it die and putting down gravel.
A couple things for what Miss Donna said here is, it'd be great if we had this is part of our Save It campaign, on these areas, so people know that. So then we don't get the calls like, what are they doing? It looks
Exactly.
terrible, But also, so I wrote that down actually.
Tearing down the City Hall.
But the other thing is you mentioned roses as high water use, but I wouldn't like to see our rose garden go away anytime soon.
No.
But the City Hall, so when I first saw this, I'm looking in it, from what I can see here on this picture, it just looks like you extended the parking lot, But when you showed the picture of like a labyrinth type and that picture, then I'm like, that's kind of what we want. But then you said the B word too. We need to see what's in the budget.
Sure,
right?
sure.
But
Be trees in that.
yeah, but something like that would be great. And then I had a question for Greg too, because he brought up not to be forgotten, Greg. He brought up the decomposed granite, and I'm not the biggest fan. I imagine it's economical, and
That's what all that is.
I know, but I mean, I'm more fan of the bigger rocks. And when I see decomposed granite, I think of the little fine stuff. Okay, so I mean, be more like landscaping type. Okay, when I think of decomposed granite, I think it's almost like dirt. What's that?
If I could address the synthetic
They look
turf,
almost like aspen trees.
it's very, very hot in the summertime.
Yeah.
We actually irrigate it
These are birch.
for play areas for kids so that they can get out of there. Otherwise, if a dog was on it,
super
it's
hot.
gonna burn its feet, the kids are gonna burn, so. I'm not a big fan of that in a setting like this, to be honest with you. I think they need,
Yeah, there may be better places to use it.
yeah.
Yeah, and if I can piggyback a little bit off of that, so Greg earlier mentioned demonstration gardens. So a demonstration garden is essentially a landscape where you have placards and signs to educate people that are looking to add
of
plants to their
plants and
landscape, so they can walk by and say, wow, what an
like
incredible
that.
tree,
What
what
is
is that? And then they can go and add it to their own landscape. And I think if we shy away from artificial turf and keep the real turf, there's also an opportunity to educate people on what water conservation for watering turf looks like. what is a smart controller? What are, pressure regulating sprinkler nozzles and pressure regulating drip systems? What does that even mean? We want to really emphasize to people that water conservation is not getting rid of all of turf. There are really smart ways and efficient ways to water it, and we want to emphasize that, and there's an amazing opportunity to emphasize that with keeping turf at City Hall. So,
Most of the conservation's done in smaller units, aren't they? Or like, you don't have anything that gets water into the Grand Canyon or one of the other places when the Colorado River, when you get a good rain.
I'm not sure I understand the question entirely.
Well, just an example, and I live in Coyote Ranch, and on Coyote Ranch, we took about maybe a sixth of the grass out, and we put in a decompressed or compacted walkway, kind of like what we're doing for our 1 mile that we just finished. It's the same type of surface. And so we actually eliminated a huge amount of watering because our water bill was outrageous. And as part of the HOA board, we made that decision. So it cost us a little bit of money to do it, but we made up in the savings on the water, actually within the first year of it being done. So there's things you can do. There's even at Dave White, there's a ton of space we could probably take out of grass in Dave White, but that's another project, I know. So.
Yeah, and we're looking at all of those comprehensively as we go. Reluca mentioned that, and one topic on the signage as we go, this great partnership that we have. We have signs up for sure at Dorothy Powell.
And the splash pad.
And the splash pad.
Yes.
And signs coming at 501.
Yes.
And it explains the process.
Put a little less word in it and just so people will read it.
Water
And I don't know,
project.
there might be an example of it on the one slide that has
Yeah.
the
I
three.
saw it at Dorothy.
Yeah, I've seen, we
Yep.
saw the Dorothy Powell one.
Yeah, so which way am I going? I can't tell.
I think you're going the right way.
Am I going the
got
right way?
these from I'm sorry.
There you go.
There we go.
I guess there
I
isn't a
don't
sign.
think.
You sent it in an email. It was in
Yeah,
an
we-
email.
we
I
that-
saw
thought I
it.
saw
Okay.
one at,
We did.
Yeah. and-
We email a lot, and so I know I've passed it, and I think I forwarded on to you, so.
Yeah, so part of the Saves It, the mini series, is putting up signage to make sure that we're really transparent about conservation, because that was a big thing that we were getting comments on about the splash pad is how are you emphasizing water conservation and yet we just built in a splash pad? These things don't make sense, and so we emphasize with that sign how conservation was at the forefront of the splash pad and how we're able to have really nice things if we just make sure that we use our water super efficiently. So, more to come.
All right, thank you, Reluca. Thank you to Arizona Water as well for all you
you.
guys' work.
thank you.
And Greg, thank you. Thank you, Steve.
Mr.
All right.
Mayor?
Yes,
If I
sir.
can make one comment for the mayor and council and for the residents watching this evening, the mayor and council will be taking action on a city hall project later this evening. That does not include any of the discussion that we've had this evening related to turf reduction. It is specifically to the pathway, the sidewalk replacement. So just make sure that everybody's clear on that.
So it's not going to be in that number?
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, is that it, Larry?
It's on the Colorado River.
Okay, well, we'll stand adjourned for 15 minutes. We'll reconvene at 7 o'clock.
This.
Thank you, everyone.